Okay, so I'm just really so grateful, Judy, that you could be here today to be interviewed, and so grateful that you said yes, because obviously, without you, I certainly wouldn't be on this journey of transformational breath and breath work in general. So I just want to start with saying how grateful I am for your life's work and all that you've achieved and all that it's brought me personally, and brought so many people that I've worked with as well with Katarina. So I just want to start off with a sort of general first question, which is kind of looking back over 50 years. You've been doing this for 50 years, which is
Yes,
a
yes.
considerable achievement. It is just, and there's a big celebration coming up in Turkey, the 50 years celebration. So it'll be a time for, I suppose, looking back. And I just want to hear some of your thoughts about what it means to having achieved 50 years of work in this field, 50 years of transformational breath.
Well, thank you, first of all, for inviting me, Paul, and having an opportunity to share more about transformational breath. And, you know, I'm, I've been so present with what needs to be done now that I don't often think like, oh, wow, bask in the memory. So now this event is kind of putting me in a position to reflect back and what it was like in the beginning and just how it evolved at its own pace. Part of me was like, we should be bigger, it should be growing faster, and yet everything is unfolded perfectly. And to reflect back on somehow it was, how it grew, those who came in and stayed, those who came in and left, and just how state of the art we've gotten, over those years, and how the support, physical and non-physical, that we've gotten over the years has been phenomenal. And there's just so much one person's talent, mine would go, and yet this baby of ours, transformational breath, needed so much more to bring it to where it was. And amazing people like you, like Katrina, like some of the people who've contributed so much to the areas where I not only do I not excel, I just don't know. And so, just taking everything of ours, our materials, our marketing, our outreach online, all these wonderful things, and our program development to another level. And I'm so grateful for that. And yet it's been quite a journey that I haven't thought about for a while, you know.
So,
Yeah.
so just take us back in time and give us a feel of what it was like. Because I remember you telling me one time that in the early days I used to cook them lunch. I used to make the lunch in the kitchen. So give us a feeling for that, because I know that you're also a mother of 8 children. So you were, I imagine, very, very busy just on a sort of general level. But just tell us about what the beginnings were like and how people, I mean, were people easy to convince to lie down and breathe, or how was it?
Well, and I could go back to the beginning, the 70s, the early 80s, where things were just starting to open up. I was in California, and that's where they say the spiritual revolution happened, where the things
Mm.
just started to get alternative and new age and spiritual. And so I was there and working in metaphysics as a what we call prayer therapist and minister. And so I had the opportunity to experience, did a trade with someone who was one of the original rebirthers. And after the session I did with her and she did with me, she says, you should bring the breath into your work. And so organically it happened. I didn't go to any trainings. I was already working on the inner dimensions with some of the let's say the teachers who wanted to bring the breath to the world. And so it just started, and I felt very passionate about it. The results I could see, combining it with the spiritual connection and process I was using, was phenomenal. And so at some point when I had moved to the East Coast, there was let's just say an organization developed, and my job was to go to the individual cities around the country, and with no cell phone, no internet, no printed material, just go literally knocking on doors of different centers. If there was like a holistic newspaper for that town, I would pick it up and make a cold call and say, and just go and offer a session, and then go to another place. And then there were places obviously that it resonated with, and they were open to doing a workshop. So we do a workshop, first do some sessions, then do a workshop. From the workshop, they would want to organize more or continue the growth. And this went on maybe 10 or 20 cities in the US, where that's how we began our first trainings. And then, so it was interesting for materials. We put some articles together, was our manual, and a couple, oh, there was so much to it, but really with nothing, just going with my conviction, and then realize that other people wanted other people, and maybe doing massage work, maybe doing therapy, maybe just loving the work, wanting to do it. And so in different areas, people who were more committed than wanting to experience it, but wanted to organize, started showing up, and they would put together, bigger, more committed groups. And that's how we got rolling. Then, then the international market opened in 2000. I remember that. And one of our people was Louise Hay trainer, and she did a session for an international Louise Hay gathering in Hawaii. And at that gathering were the Louise Hay head trainers from pretty much all over, but mostly Europe. And they experienced the session. They go, wow, what was that? So that's when all the international
Mm.
invitations started. And, one country after the other, and the same process. And yet, it was not advertising, it was the experience that people had. But it was very, very rough. And at some point, I had to make a decision. Do I want to be the only one doing it, or do I want to train other people to do it? And it was so clear that this was for everyone, and it needed to reach. And there's no way I could breathe everyone, even though my heart would like to. That this was for everyone, and other people needed to do it, and then other people needed to teach it, and other people needed to train. And life has supported that vision, so that if I'm no longer in this world, this work is going to continue in a beautiful way.
And I think, talking about, how you developed, and I think one of the things that characterizes transformational breath, at least from my perspective, is the fact that transformational breath, and obviously this reflects on you, is very open to other techniques. And as soon as I look at transformational breath, and in a multi-dimensional perspective, in the sense that it brings a lot to the table. It's not just breath work. It's breath work as the central piece, but there's loads of other components that go into a seminar and go into the training. So I just, want you to say a few words on just this openness that you have to other techniques. Byron Katie, Michael Brown, the Five Rights, all those things, coaching, which you also said yes to, and integrated that into the training. What specifically has been guiding you in terms of what you say yes to, what you say no to, and how you
Yeah.
develop?
Yes. Well, I'll talk about just what we've incorporated into the process. These are parts of our program that I feel enhance the program, and that I have specific permission from the creators to bring it into our programs as things people can do at home for themselves, for their own transformation, that are usually user-friendly, loving, and kind of coincide with our belief structure. And but there's other technique that we brought into transformational breath that is not, let's say, part of some of the other traditional breath works, that should be acknowledged, and say what they add to it. First of all, we were guided to bring sound in, because sound, as you know, is a very high frequency. And so there's places in breath work where people just get stuck. The feelings, the physical sensations are overwhelming, the emotions are overwhelming, and it's almost literally impossible to breathe. So they get stuck in a place of just out of control, for, it can be up to a half hour is what I saw in other traditions. And yet we were given the knowledge and the ability to work with sound to move that energy incredibly fast. So if someone is in physical discomfort, they make what we call tones, loud, pure sounds that raise the frequency. If they're emotionally overwhelmed, then it's too hard maybe to get back to the breath, so they will make that sound. And that sound will actually support the integration of what was going on. So that's an incredible gift. And that was like a no-brainer, like, yes, sound can definitely make the process more effective, that can support the breathers from moving past whatever big things come up. And we know big things come up in the
Oh yeah.
session. And so that was a natural. The invocations were very much part of what I did, asking for, let's say, support from the higher awarenesses that exist within us and maybe in the universe. And so that's an important factor to have that support, because when you breathe, as you know, Paul, we go into invisible dimensions, and the human consciousness doesn't understand that. Even after many years of working there, I don't understand it. So I asked the levels of consciousness that does, and depending on where we're doing it, what it's called, but to understand that we all have higher levels of consciousness, and there are beings at those levels that are available. So we worked with that from the beginning, and that was just something that actually took our process to a magical level, to a level beyond human possibilities, to infinite possibilities. So we loved working with the what we call invocations, just invoking what we want to create in a session. And then somewhere along the line, the hands-on crept in, the ability to use our hands, use our body to support the process while someone's going through, either working with the muscle structures that are controlling respiration, or holding them, or creating some compression to help open the breath. And these keep expanding. When we see something that's really beneficial, like, yeah, we could do that too. So again, to support the breath and the integration and transformation that's happening in the sessions. So we're open. We're an open-ended process. We have a process for bringing something new, because we don't want to have transformational breath east, transformational breath west. We want it to be congruent. We want it all to be congruent around the world. So we have a process to bring it in, so all our professionals can know about it and use it. And we're not offering a mocha latte in France and getting a different mocha latte in California. So those are the primary things that we have brought into the breath work that I think make us outstanding and make the process more effective, and just kind of going along with what else is available to support.
Yeah, and I think it's, obviously that is central now to transformational breath's teachings and how it's transmitted. But I also feel that the close affiliation with Michael Brown and getting closer to him over the weekends that we're running, the presence of breath, and he's now coming in and Q&As on level fours, and I just find his rigor and his understanding of the breath work, and having chosen transformational breath as the only school which he validates, that's for me an incredible support for what you do, what we all do.
Yes, yes. And it is an incredible gift, and one of those things that just gets set up. You can't try to make it happen, but are
No.
connecting around the similar consciousness and same verbiage we would use, and the same intention and goals. So, and Michael identifies his work as the masculine aspect, and transformational breath as the feminine, the feeling, and it's so true. So it was a great blessing to have his work to refer people to, and that for his endorsement of what we're doing, and the friendship too. Just an
Mm,
amazing being too.
mm. And this is obviously as well, it's mandatory for all facilitators to do the process. Michael Brown's process. And I think that kind of also reflects the rigor and the discipline that you want to transmit to all facilitators. And we did a recent level 5, as you know, teachers training in France, which was amazing. 36 people last November, and you and Jeannie came, and it was just a wonderful event. But I really noticed, having done several level 5s in the past, that there was like a net, a clear increase in rigor and in discipline. So maybe just, and I think this is, I don't know, in view of leaving a legacy which is tighter and more, I don't know, more refined. That's the impression that I got. I certainly felt that, my God, we're going up a level. It's not that we're staying still. The level 5s we did 10 years ago are not the same as the ones we're doing
No,
nowadays. So
no.
just a few words about this, what I would term increase of rigor, increase of definition.
Well, for one thing, all our manuals are continually being rewritten, and we've had a new, let's say, just a new flow of just doing them in the all of them in the last few years, and put in book format and looking way more professional and updating the information because consciousness changes, and some of the things that, and we're giving new information and improvements happen. So we're continually upgrading that, and then looking at the programs and um, fine tuning them. Is this really adding to it, or can we bring this in? So but there's another wave because we've done 5 level 5s in the last 2 years, which is unheard of. We used to do one a year somewhere. And there's just a new wave of enthusiastic, and it was so present in France, present, loving, excited people that really see and feel the potential of this work for creating change literally at the global level, and feeling called to it at a deep level. And we're just seeing, just I don't know if it's a generation, what you would call that generation or what, but it's just, they are younger. Of course, everybody's younger than me now, but they are younger, more enthusiastic and passionate and present and excited. So, and it could be just how things are evolving on the planet, but I remember that at one point, when we very first began, um, the we did 5 days, and the facilitator and the personal transformation and the facilitator training went together, and that totally didn't work. It was too much. We saw clearly that there's so much processing, personal processing going on in that initial phase, that you're not going to be able to instruct anyone to be present and work with another with such a deep process. So eventually it went from 5 days and then 3 days, nope, not enough. 5 days and then 5 days, nope, not enough. And then pretty soon we came to 5 days and 7 days and 7 days for that professional individual training. And it was really important because we kind of leveled off there, because people are ready to start their internship at that point. And then there's another level of learning and experience. So through all those years, we've seen what it really takes to train someone to do this effectively and safely, and really understand the depth of where you're working and how to work with it. We are working at the deepest levels of the psyche, where memories and traumas and old feelings are, and you better know what you're doing if you're going to go in there. And I'm very reassured that people are trained well, and before they're certified after their internship, that they know what they're doing and they have confidence and skills.
Yeah, I mean, that's really become something which is evident when you start to get into the nuts and bolts of training people to facilitate, that you need time. You need not only excellent training, but you need time to integrate, time to bring your own process up to level. And it's deep work. It's really deep work. And what struck me with level 5 was that here we are going to another level, which is group leader, which is where you're going to be actually leading groups. And that is a whole different ball game. And so again, you get this feeling that this is something, and this again, something that came across to me in level 5 training in November was that we're going to be we're going to be helping them along the way as well in that process of becoming group leader. It's not just in the facilitation that we're going to be holding their hands, as it were, and accompanying them, but also as a group leader, that they feel that they are being supported and guided throughout that process, which is a complicated one. Having your first
Yeah.
groups, getting your first customers, organizing, buying the stuff in order to get the right space, et cetera, et cetera. It's not easy. And it's it's something that you need to be supported to do. And and this is, I think, a really amazing part of the training is the support.
Yes, yes. And the support is built into our system, that there's a mentorship through all the phases of this work, and that people are supported that way individually after the actual in-person or online programs, that there's always someone to reach out to support them, because it's very deep work, and sometimes amazing things happen that you can't even believe when you go into the subconscious levels. And so it's really important that, and then you get tested along the way, like, what am I doing? Is sure this works? Those were some of my thoughts in the beginning. I'd sit down and like, what am I doing? Total bubble of doubt. And yet there every
Mm.
time it would be a miracle, every
Yeah,
session's
and just
miraculous.
to react to that, because I resonate a lot with that, is that even after 10 years of doing this work, I still feel that every step forward is an act of faith. Every seminar almost is an act of faith. Every training that we do needs faith. It needs for us to step forward into the unknown. And I was just reflecting on that because I was thinking that at some point it must get easier. It must we must have an armchair in which we can kind of settle back and relax in. But it doesn't seem to work that way. It seems to demand every single time stepping up.
Yes, yes. It's something that after you do your personal journey, through that original seminar, then it's a deeper thing. It's a calling that, and I feel there are people who are in this world that came here to do this specific work, and the beings that show up are amazing
Hmm.
and phenomenal. And I'm so grateful for that, because literally there have been millions of people in this world that have experienced transformational breath. As the web goes on, you train one person and they reach out to 100, and it just goes on and on and on. So it's amazing that um, it's grown like that, and clearly guided, because it wasn't something I wasn't necessarily would call myself a visionary or had this big map planned out. I would just keep showing up, I did have expectations in some places, and I started working in the Washington, D.C. area, and my agenda, I was going to breed the president, and I got close, but it wasn't part of the big plan, and it taught me a big lesson about just, let the ego go and trust,
Hmm. Hmm.
trust
Hmm.
it, just
Hmm.
trust it all.
And one of the people that I really resonated with during the level 5 training was your son, Abe, who I hadn't met before in a deeper way, and I was just so blown away by him. And I just wanted your thoughts on what's it like working with your son in your training.
It's really sweet. It's really sweet. And he hasn't gotten, except that I choose to work with him, any special privileges he had to earn, being a facilitator and then a trainer, and then to be even independent at times with his work. But it's really nice that we have this personal connection, and he's always been one of my kids that have been very loving and respectful. And so that yeah, I think that's the bottom line there. And then to bring it professionally, and sometimes there might be a little, attitude come in at some point. Maybe I think it comes in more like he drives too fast, and like I get an attitude when I say slow down, slow down. But otherwise, an incredible gift to see him involved at the level he is, and know I have the option of bringing him in, and he supports me physically a lot because as I get a little older, I need a little more physical support, lugging things, and had some leg injuries this year too. So it's amazing that that happened, and nothing was pushed, not one word, not he just felt that calling and was motivated and followed through with it. So it's really amazing. It's wonderful, and he's a great guy too. So
He's a great guy, wonderful guy, and I really appreciated his presence during the level five. Um, and just to add on to that, as you know, with this series of interviews, I haven't interviewed that many, but I've interviewed, I think, 5 or 6 senior trainers around
all
the world.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so, and they've all expressed, at one point in the interview, they talk about you, and they express their gratitude for you and their admiration for your knowledge of the breath. So my question would be something like, can you describe your own internal process? Because having worked with you, you seem to have second sight for the breath. You seem to know where it's going and
Yeah.
what's happening. And I just want to get an indication of what it's like to be you. I mean, how do you feel things when you're working with somebody on their breath?
Well, it's I think I go into a different zone. I think I just I see a breath, and then I know what's going on. I know what needs to happen. And um, even at a question and answer, I've been done a lot the last few years online, and a question comes up, and the knowledge is just there. And it's sometimes I'm surprised by the answers because I'd never thought about it. And so it's just kind of a being open, I think, to, let's just say, higher awareness, higher knowledge about it. But I really feel like um, I'm an authority. Sometimes people will call me a master, and if it's not about my personal life, but when I do the breath, I feel like I have a mastery of the knowledge of, we could call it integrative breathing, and what it is and what it takes and what it means at a deeper level, which is more than if someone said write it down, I probably couldn't, but that knowledge is there and it comes through. Um, so it's an incredible gift to just be so tuned into something that you have that level of expertise and could be among the finest. They come up and like, all right, let's challenge Judi, and like, I'll sit with you. I know what I know, let's just say, and that's there, and but I don't think I'm any different than anyone else. 50 years is a lot of time to be focused intently on one thing, and so I think I'm not any better or smarter. I think I've just had more experience, and that's what comes through. Is um, so humbly I say that, anyone could have that level of knowledge, and part of it is just be able to surrender in that moment when you don't know what's going on, and you want to, and allow that information to come through because it's all there. It's all there.
And you mentioned earlier that people have got to find a calling for this work. I mean, it's
Hmm.
it's people who have calling. They have a calling, then they will continue. If they don't have a calling, they won't continue. But I was just wondering because recently in an interview, Michael Brown talked about 1% of the world's population. That's the figure that he used. 1% are involved in emotional integration because it's difficult, because it's hard. So what would you say about that? I mean, is this work for everybody? Can anybody do it? Technically, yes, but in reality, is it that there's only a small amount of people that are going to be really interested in it or have a calling for it?
Well, my opinion is everybody needs to do it, at least at the personal level. They need to have a conscious relationship with their breath. They need to know how they breathe, what it means, how they can expand it and create changes in their life, how they can use it as a tool on every level. This is something we should be teaching babies, and that, and
Mm.
so as far as I'm concerned, it needs to be 100%. And maybe it's not everybody's path, but that's my mission, is to like just say, hey, you don't get to skip over the breathing piece. You need to relate to your breath physically, mental, emotionally, and spiritually. And so this is, you know, it's important. As far as doing it professionally, then maybe that is a 1% or less. That's still a lot of people,
Yeah,
and
still a lot of
still,
people.
and it's deep work. It's in some ways it's intense work, because when you're doing this work, you're working on every level, the physical, the mental, you're there physically present, you're mentally, emotionally available, and working with that person's thoughts and feelings. And then spiritually, you have to be open and aligned to hold that consciousness and energy for that to happen, and to, let's say, hold the highest perspective of what's actually going on in front of you. And so it takes a lot, and unless you're called, it's not gonna, you're not gonna do all that, and some people go on just to in the different levels to have more experience with their own breath, and that's just fine. There's space for people to come and continue their journey at the other levels. And yet, to do this work, it's a commitment, and it's rewarded incredibly, not only the fulfillment from the work, but life just kind of pours blessings on the people who give that way and that deeply.
Yeah, I mean that's something that I've certainly felt in my life. And just going back to this and what you talked about at the beginning was that it was really inspired to a large extent by your your spiritual searching, and the breath came as a kind of a natural central piece to that. But I was just curious about, because I don't think it's true of other or all breath schools, is how in transformational breath I always feel that the spiritual is central. It's foundational. It's not only in the invocations and all the framing of the work, but it's there at every corner, really. It's omnipresent. And I remember as a trainer having some resistance to that at the beginning, and feeling, all this talk and all this, this woo-woo stuff, and oh my God, why do we have to talk about that? But in fact, I really have found with the understanding is that you need it. You need it. You need that spiritual dimension. You need that spiritual support from unseen forces, or whatever you want to call them, but from the world, the universe, or whatever. Um, so just a few words about that spiritual dimension, which is difficult to talk about really, because it means different things to different people, but it's so fundamental. And I think to the experience of people who end up continuing this path, I think it's central to everybody that has a calling, from what I can
It's
see.
one it's one of the things that makes us unique, and yet being an international program, that we've worked in Asia, we've worked in the Middle East, we've worked all over Europe, Mexico, all kinds of religions and cultures, that can be a deal breaker if you don't use the right verbiage. And yet the essence of the understanding of the spiritual nature of the work is always there, and yet how we frame it. In some places we have to be very careful, because we could even be breaking the law in
That's
some
right.
countries,
That's right.
so it's like,
Be very
yeah, so
careful.
so in our materials, we've kind of neutralized that, but we also always emphasize the consciousness of the facilitator, holding the space of what we call miracle consciousness, the spiritual perception of reality, identifying source and our connection to source, and the perfection of that, and how it comes into this world, and how we create our experience through that connection. And so we maintain that, and again with different verbiage, and also understanding that there are parts of us and parts of life that are beyond, let's just say, higher dimensional uh, attributes than the human. Like we are third dimension, and we also talk about another vibrational dimension within us, the fourth dimension, and even higher vibrational aspects, awareness of us, fifth dimension and above. And again, depending where we are, how it's framed, but just to recognize that these parts are living through us. We're not our body, we're not our thoughts, we're not our emotions, that there's something, we are more than that. And that's pretty safe to say anywhere, but maybe using the different words. and so and so that is a foundation of what we do, the recognition of that, and um, opening that door for the unlimited possibilities that can happen by having that in our consciousness and space.
Yeah, and I know that having talked to a lot of facilitators, a lot of members of our staff anyway, one of the reasons why they keep coming back is because of that incredibly delicious feeling that everybody picks up on in the integration part of the breathing sessions, where everybody just feels blessed to be there because of this, and I don't know how else to describe it, but as being some kind of spiritual, palpable energy in the room, which is always miraculous to a certain extent, or at least it's this delicious. Everybody's like little bees, you know, munching the honey, as it were, at the end of the session, and that's why they keep coming back. But
Yeah.
that spiritual dimension is just incredibly powerful, and I think it takes a certain amount of bravery to kind of put it up front and to put it as a central piece, as opposed to not talking about it, which is what I think some people would, have chosen to do, so as to avoid the legal issues or semantic issues that one might have in different countries. But just to talk about that briefly, because I know that having talked with Banal, they do all women seminars or all men seminars in the Middle East, and keeping the sexes apart. It just makes a lot of cultural sense. But and I know that things in China are quite different from what they are in Europe, when even talking about spiritual matters or whatever. But is it just pure pragmatism that guides you to make adaptations of different countries, different cultures? What guides you to make those kind of decisions, which are kind of difficult to make?
Well, we get feedback. Usually there's someone organizing for us there who has probably taken the program somewhere else and has a context for, like, well, that ain't going to work here, So how we can and begin changing the verbiage and not really the perspective, but just what is palatable and acceptable, and nothing changes the energy of the sessions. Like, that is, and so sometimes you don't need the words to experience the spiritual, it's just there. And people experience that loving, peaceful, unconditional space inside of themselves, and you don't have to call it anything. And and so we have to change a lot of the verbiage in the invocations, because of, again, how that perception and relationship with the divine is in that culture. And there's more now. We're going into some Orthodox religions. We're going into some Buddhist teaching, places, Buddhist events. So it's just, it just fits, because I think my training and early background is very um, mixed denominational, in that my father was of Jewish descent, my mother was Catholic, my sister and I raised ourselves Protestant, and then I, as an early mother, I would go to a lot of the Hindu gatherings, the yogic gatherings, and then one of my main teachers was a Buddhist Lama who I was with for several years, and so it was just natural. And then I went to Turkey and just fell in love with the Muslim culture and the practices. So it just all seems to fit. And to me, the underlying message in all of them is love. So how can you argue with that? It's just like, this is how it's evolved here, and this is who it represents there. But it's all love, and if that's the energy you come in with, like, you're fine, you're fine. And I have nothing to prove, religiously,
And one of the things that struck me with the with interviewing other senior trainers was the love they have for this work, the extraordinary love that really inspires them on a daily basis. So my question is, what's your relationship with the senior trainers, the trainers? How do you see them?
Well, I'm really touched that you say that. And I see them as my babies because they may not remember their first session, but they've all been trained by me in one way or the other. At some level, they've popped in, and some of them since their first breath. So it's just sort of like I just have an immense love and appreciation that they feel called to this work. I know right now things seem to be a little discouraging about, the post-COVID flow. It's happening everywhere, and we're just adjusting to a new world and seeing, how do we fit in? What's our evolution here? And it doesn't mean that there's less interest or value. I think one of the things people in general need to start discerning what breath school is, let's just say, established, credible, and safe. Because there's some fly-by-nights coming up, and they're getting people breathing. All right, good for you. But it's like people need to really examine the credibility and the history of, if they decide to take a training, they need to look at, like, what's this school's history and how long has it been and where are they? And, you know, where's the feedback? Everybody can have a great experience in a breathing day or weekend, but that doesn't train you to do this work. It's incredibly deep, and um, there's so much to it. You breathe and you think, oh, I'm just breathing, but no, 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 no. There's, as you know, Paul, there's so much to it. So I love the trainers. I appreciate them. They are my babies, even when they, like my children, get disgruntled and think things should be other ways. I'm like, And what I can say is that we all have to look to our own consciousness about what we're creating,
Hmm.
and if people are unhappy with whatever's going on, just bring it home and breathe on it. We have the tool, we have the capacity, and to but I love them all, even when they're complaining. I
Talking to
love
Judy, talking to
you.
Judy, who's like your right hand woman, as it were. She talked about her background as a scientist, and how she was always interested in the science of breath work and the science of transformational breath, and is hoping to bring more and more science to what we do, which I think is a really, a wonderful inspired contributional act. Certainly could be. But on the other hand, it's really complicated to actually bring science into an area which is incredibly difficult to quantify and qualify. But one of the things that she said was that actually one scientific approach that could be used is the fact that if you're doing the same technique in 50 different countries in the world, which is the case of transformational breath, and you're getting continually same results, then that is scientific, well, almost scientific proof, because it's meta
Yeah,
science of the validity of the technique. So there's a kind of I think well, for me oh, I didn't realize that's actually scientific, isn't it? That's actually,
yes,
just the simple fact that it's done in 50 different countries, and it has the same results in 50 different countries. That's as good as you can get sometimes in certain areas. So my question is something about, I mean, do you see more science coming into the work? Do you see experiments going on? What do you see happening in the future? Or will it be always a sort of meta science, as it were?
Um, well, first of all, I learned not too long ago that we are scientific, and that the science that we're experiencing is called empirical science. It's science based on
Empirical, that's
experience.
exactly
Yes.
empirical
And
science.
I
Yeah.
love that phrase because we have different aspects like the body mapping, like the breathing analysis, like a number of the things that we do, the flow of the breath and the opening of different areas of expression that are proven over and over again. And so that does correlate to empirical science. However, right before COVID, we had a great science project going down in Mexico. She had coordinated it. We had different someone who had done a lot of research science on board. She had facilitators all over the country ready to set up this whole research project, and then COVID happened, and then we had to like just really focus in a different direction to keep our programs going, and went focusing a lot the last few years online. And yet that's something that is, I think, when you win over such a large part of the population, like we have Nadia working with, her focus has been cancer, and there are other people who have done some research projects, but it's something I'm totally open to. And I think I would like to support, especially areas where we know it's a no-brainer, like post-traumatic stress, like respiratory conditions, like I mean, you name it, it's effective. You know that, Paul, but just areas where we could be so effective in proving, hey, this works. But it's getting the manpower, the funds to follow through, because it's not a come for 2 days and prove this. You have to follow up and do a
Mm.
continuous. So it takes some organization, and I know there'll be a day for that because it works. We have incredible results, long-term results.
Yeah, and just to say a few words about that, because it's always kind of fascinated me that I think we're the only breath school where we say yes to just about everybody, no matter what their condition is, whether they're terminally ill or whatever. So it really is something to be able to say we breathe babies, newborn babies, and we breathe people who are terminally ill. Um, what I mean, obviously you've had the most experience of that, of both ends of the spectrum, because I've seen you breathe babies. I've never breathed a baby yet, but I'm hoping to one day. But just seeing you breathe babies was such a beautiful, loving experience. I haven't seen you breathe someone who's terminally ill, but what's it like to be at, have had experience at both ends of the spectrum, as it were, people who are very ill and dying, and babies that have just been born. What's your perception of that?
Well, I haven't up until this moment thought about that spectrum, and yet it's just, this soul, this body, this being here that has come to receive the breath, and to it's really like receiving their spirit, because in so many languages, breath is spirit. The word breath and spirit are the same. So you're freeing the life force, you're freeing the movement of spirit in their um, not only their energy field, but in their body. And so it's just kind of the same thing happening at a younger, older, but the breathing to support someone in transition is a very kind of sacred job, as far, well, they all are, but as far as it's just kind of unique to know that someone is leaving their body and you're there to support them, you know, through that process, and actually sometimes be present during that time. And it's amazing, it's just amazing to have that opportunity, and then to take a newborn and support its breath opening up, and any trauma from its birth or anything that it brought in with them in that body or consciousness is also incredible. Like you're non-verbally doing this thing or allowing it to happen in your presence. So it's it's all a gift, really. It's a gift we've been given.
And I think you're a gift to us all, Judy. You're someone who I obviously admire for what you've achieved, but you have this extraordinary personality which goes from being very spiritual at some points to being very down to earth and pragmatic in other areas, which I think is the one of the beauties of being human, is to be able to be able to function in different colors, as it were.
Yeah.
But one of the things that people say about you is you walk your talk, and who you are in public and who you are in private are the same. Um,
Oh,
so, and I think that's a big tribute because this is something that obviously especially in spiritual circles or whatever, you can see discrepancies between public and private. And obviously that's not particularly healthy, but you seem to be able to function in different areas of life and just you're natural. You're just you.
oh,
Uh, so I suppose my question is, how do you make sure that you keep being you? What's the recipe to be, I suppose, faithful to yourself? It's like the famous sentence from Shakespeare, "To thine own self be true,"
yeah.
which was said by Polonius, who was like this, a ridiculously pretentious figure of court, but he says something which is probably the most powerful sentence in Shakespeare: "To thine own self be true." So how do you live that, being true to yourself?
Well, it's a good part of staying in balance. And there are times I've been out of balance, just like loving this work so much, just kind of, just taking too much time for that. And so being able to, and the universe has helped me because they gave me COVID, not physically COVID, but COVID came and I had to stay home for a while. So,
Yeah,
but
you had to stop traveling. Yeah.
yeah, because I was prior to that just on the road all the time. I mean, literally all the time. So it was too much. But just to, you know, be able to continue my breathing, my spiritual practices, meditation and staying physically fit and, but I think the big answer is just coming back to all the time to love and really, finding some importance to loving myself, giving myself some acknowledgement at the end of the day, like, hey, you did good. This test was there, but you reacted, but you came back to love, and knowing still on the journey too, like I'm never a lot of times on our Saturday gatherings once a month, we have the Breath Family gathering. Folks from all over the world come and we, one 150 to 200 people, we breathe all together and I give a little talk. And sometimes I know the talk I'm giving is for me, but I'm sharing it with those people too. Like, yeah, you could really do this more. And so just knowing and really wanting to melt more and more into the oneness, just see more and more each thing, each experience as a reflection and be honest with that. So
Thank you so much, Judy, for this interview. I really enjoyed it.
me too.
So oh, good. So just a few final words, if you have any. If you'd like to say something, anything more, then now's the time.
Yeah. Well, I just want to acknowledge this interview too, because it's different when you're doing the interview, and I've done lots of them with someone who hasn't even experienced the work, but they're just kind of, stabbing. Then doing an interview with someone who really knows it, like you do, Paul, and the essence of the work, and it's just a different level that we can communicate on. So I feel like this was really good depth of sharing this work and who we are and our relationship to it. So I appreciate that. And I just so grateful for all the people who have shown up for it because truly it was just one person, at one time with a vision, with a not so much of a vision, but a need to share something so wonderful given and that to see it come to fruition and not too long ago, well, actually it was quite a while ago, I was given metaphorically, but it was very real to me, a torch. And I was told that transformational breath was the breath work of the world. And at the time, it didn't seem to be real. And yet now I'm seeing it happen. And it is. So we should be proud at whatever level we're participating in it. Just be proud and honored that we get to be part of that. So, don't know what I was going to say, but it came out.
Thank you, Judy. I'm gonna